Welcome to Red Story. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the plot. My controlling mother tried to ruin my life, but I fought back. My name is Sarah, and for as long as I can remember, my mother, whom I'll call Karen, has controlled every aspect of my life. She's entitled, manipulative, and always demands things to go her way. For years, I tried to please her, but it was never enough. Things got worse when I had my son, Brian. Karen tried to control how I raised him, and her behavior became unbearable. Karen's manipulation escalated until it turned into outright terrorizing. She would create chaos and fear, making our lives miserable. I knew I had to get away, not just for my sake, but for Brian's too. A friend advised me to start recording Karen whenever she misbehaved, just in case things got out of hand. The day finally came when I decided to move out. As I was packing, Karen lost her mind. She called the police, ranting that I was kidnapping her child. The officer who arrived was suspicious at first, but after I calmly explained that Brian was my son and that we were moving out, he relaxed. Karen, however, became even more irrational. She demanded that the officer arrest me, force me to sign over my parental rights to her, and interrogate me until I handed over my bank details. The officer sighed, a deep, weary sigh, as if he was wondering why he had been called out for this nonsense. The officer told Karen that he couldn't arrest me for moving out because I'm an adult and Brian is my child. He also said he couldn't force me to sign over my parental rights or hand over my bank information. He added that if she wanted to pursue grandparents' rights, she could, but based on her current behavior, it didn't seem like she was in the right frame of mind to be around any child, let alone her own grandchild. This only made Karen angrier. As the officer was leaving and I continued packing, she lunged at me, scratching my face. I instinctively defended myself by pushing her away. She screamed for the officer to arrest me for assault. The officer, having seen the entire incident, told Karen that he had witnessed her attack me first and that I was only defending myself. He then informed her that someone was going to jail that night, and it wasn't me. As Karen was handcuffed and led away, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in years, I felt free. I quickly packed everything I could and moved into my new apartment with Brian. A friend helped me set up Brian's bed, and we celebrated our newfound freedom with Chinese takeout. I don't think I've ever cried so hard out of sheer relief. After years of enduring Karen's abuse, I was finally free. Life after moving out wasn't easy. I had to quit my night job because finding childcare during those hours was impossible, and almost everyone in my family disowned me for hurting Karen. But I found a new job that paid well, around $3,000 a month, and included a full training program. I was able to afford daycare nearby, pay the bills, and still have some money left over for savings and fun activities with Brian on the weekends. Although I was relieved to be away from Karen, Brian sometimes said he missed her and liked the presents she gave him. While I didn't let Brian go without, he certainly wasn't getting spoiled like before. I didn't want to break his heart by telling him the full truth, so I explained that his grandma wasn't in our lives anymore because she treated me poorly and it had become too much for me to handle. Brian was only 7, but he understood that adults can be mean to each other. A year went by and I had turned our apartment into a home. Brian's room was filled with toys, clothes, and books, and I even managed to buy myself the queen bed I'd always dreamed of. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, and for the first time, I had financial stability. I also started dating a wonderful man I met at a luncheon hosted by my boss. We hit it off immediately, and Brian adored him. After a year of no contact with Karen, I was shocked to receive a message from one of my siblings on Facebook. They asked if I would consider talking to Karen to mend our broken family for Brian's sake. The mere thought of it sent me into a panic attack. I was terrified that Karen would try to hurt me or take Brian away if I let her back into our lives. My boyfriend, who had been incredibly supportive, suggested I talk to my therapist about it. My therapist agreed that Karen reaching out might be sincere, and the worst that could happen was the visit going poorly, leading to us going back to no contact. After thinking it over for a while, I decided not to let fear control me. I messaged my sibling back and agreed to meet Karen for lunch in a public place. I also insisted that my boyfriend come along, and my sibling reluctantly agreed. As the day of the lunch approached, Karen sent me a message saying how much she missed Brian and that she had bought loads of presents for him. I thanked her and said I was sure Brian would appreciate them. She then added that she got a special present for me too, with a devilish grin emoji attached to the message. That was the first red flag. On the day of the lunch, my anxiety was through the roof. I kept changing my mind, but my boyfriend reassured me that he would be there every step of the way and that we could leave if I felt uncomfortable. We arrived at the restaurant and my boyfriend generously offered to pay for everyone's lunch. Karen shamelessly took advantage, ordering the most expensive items on the menu, including a fancy cocktail and an extra dish to take home. After we ate, Brian excitedly opened the gifts Karen had brought for him. But when he tried to take them home, Karen stopped him, saying the toys were for her house and that he could come play with them whenever he wanted. I nearly choked on my drink. Karen then handed me a large brown envelope, smiling that fake smile of hers. I reluctantly opened it and found a petition for grandparents' rights inside. I exploded with anger, shouting at Karen that she would never get her hands on Brian, not over my dead body. I grabbed Brian and my boyfriend and we left immediately. Brian was upset about leaving the gifts behind, but I promised him I would buy him all the toys myself. The only good thing that came out of that horrible lunch was that Karen was left with the bill. I had never been involved with the courts before, and I was terrified of the lies Karen might tell. My boyfriend and therapist urged me to hire an attorney, and I found a fantastic family law attorney who was both kind and direct. Although I had recordings of Karen's abuse, my attorney explained that they weren't admissible in court unless both parties had agreed to be recorded. I was disappointed, but he assured me that Karen's previous arrest, the testimony of the officer who had arrested her, and my boyfriend's witness statement would be enough to deny her any grandparent rights. At the hearing, Karen played the victim, making outrageous claims that I was a drug user and an unfit mother. She even accused my boyfriend of abusing Brian. The judge asked if she had any proof, and Karen, with fake motherly concern, said she didn't want to ruin my life, but was only looking out for her grandchild. I couldn't help but snort in disbelief. When it was my turn to testify, I detailed the years of abuse and theft I had endured. I told the judge about the money Karen had stolen from me, the time she cut up my debit card because I wouldn't give her my PIN, and how she demanded that the police arrest me and force me to give up my bank details. The officer who had arrested Karen corroborated my story, causing Karen to turn pale. The judge ultimately denied Karen's petition for grandparents' rights, stating that she clearly needed counseling and was unstable. Karen stormed out of the courtroom, glaring at me as she left. Outside the courtroom, I told my siblings that I would never let Karen into my life or Brian's life again, and if they sided with her, I would cut them off too. After the hearing, I married my boyfriend in a small courthouse ceremony with only his family in attendance. We moved into a larger home and started building a life together. He even legally adopted Brian, making us a complete family. But Karen was like a bad penny. She just kept coming back. A couple of years later, I noticed that my husband had become distant. To my horror, I discovered that he had been cheating on me with a coworker for over a year. We divorced, but we agreed to remain amicable for Brian's sake. Despite the heartbreak, I focused on being the best mom I could be and supporting Brian in his interests like Little League. Then out of the blue, one of my siblings contacted me again, asking me to forgive Karen. They claimed she was deeply sorry for what she had done and had been in therapy. But if Karen was so sorry, why hadn't she messaged me herself? I told my sibling that I didn't want any contact with Karen after she had lied about me to a judge. Feeling like an idiot, I asked my sibling to watch my apartment and Brian while I went on a short vacation with some friends. I also asked my ex-husband to check in on my apartment while I was gone, just in case. But while I was at the spa, I got a frantic call from my ex-husband. My apartment had been trashed, the walls smeared with dog feces, and the police were looking for me. I rushed home, terrified of what I would find. When I arrived, I was arrested on the spot for drug possession, child neglect, and child endangerment. I was in shock. I don't do drugs, and I'm a responsible mother. At the police station, I was interrogated about the accusations. Karen had called the police, claiming that she had found Brian covered in bruises and dog feces. We didn't even own a dog. My PTSD flared up, and I had a severe anxiety attack that landed me in the hospital for a psych evaluation. After 3 days of being medicated, I was finally able to talk to the police again. My ex-husband had stepped in and taken Brian for a medical examination, which confirmed that he had no bruises other than a few scrapes from Little League. Both of my siblings were questioned, and they admitted that Karen had instructed them to wait until I wasn't home so she could trash my apartment and plant drugs. Karen was arrested on charges of domestic abuse, theft, destruction of property, lying to the police, and kidnapping. My siblings were also charged. I later found out that Karen had never been in therapy and had no intention of changing. She was merely biding her time, waiting to strike again. I was granted a permanent restraining order against Karen and my siblings. They were forbidden from contacting me, and if any other relative tried to reach out on their behalf, it would be a violation of the order. With Karen in jail, I started to rebuild my life. I continued therapy, as did Brian, and we began to heal. My ex-husband and I worked through our issues and agreed to co-parent Brian amicably. Despite everything, he remained a good father, and I wanted Brian to have a stable family environment. But Karen wasn't done with us yet. After her release, she tried to find us, even hiring a private investigator to track me down. She began harassing me at work, calling my office nonstop. Eventually, I had to change jobs and move again, but Karen still managed to find us. With the help of the police, we finally gathered enough evidence to have Karen and her accomplices arrested for their crimes. My uncles, who were involved in the harassment, were also taken into custody, and I felt a huge sense of relief knowing they would be behind bars for a long time. Finally, I was free, my family was safe, and I could breathe easy knowing that Karen would no longer be able to terrorize us. It's been a long and difficult journey, but with the support of my ex-husband, my therapist, and my loved ones, I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it serves as a reminder that no matter how difficult things may seem, there is always hope and a way out.